Hi, I'm back with a second video for you. I'm so excited for today's video. We're going to be talking about trans novels. All of the novels that I'm talking about today, I would recommend. There are quite a few trans novels that I would not recommend to a friend, maybe to an enemy. But these ones I recommend to you. Also, do you like my new shoes? Yeah, I got new shoes. I think they're really cute. Do you like them? Oh my god, in one of my yoga classes, we were doing an kind of inverted pigeon stretch where we were pulling our leg up to us, and then she was having us cradle our legs like this and rocking our legs, and then was telling us to imagine that our calves were our inner child and we are like nursing our inner childs. And I just think you all should know about that experience because it sits rent-free in my mind almost every time I look at my calves. The first book I'd recommend to a bestie is Future Feeling by Joss Lake. It follows a trans man that's in his early 20s, living in a neighborhood that's pretty popular in Queens. He's not really cool, but he's hot. He's like hot enough that he's sleeping with this B-list celebrity, but he's really jealous of this other trans mask influencer, along with his witch roommate, which if you've lived in a Brooklyn apartment with a witch roommate, it's the exact witch roommate that you've lived with in a Brooklyn apartment. Penn asks the witch roommate to hex the Instagram influencer. Something goes awry, and instead they end up hexing another trans man that neither of them know to something called the Shadowlands. Now, the Shadowlands in the book is sort of a rite of passage that every trans person has to go through. It's kind of like a depression hazing, which is an interesting idea. So Penn and the Instagram influencer end up teaming up to go save the third party trans guy. It's kind of like a funny buddy comedy, but it's also sci-fi and it's pretty lighthearted. It's something that I would recommend to a bestie for a beach read. The characters are a little flat, but the premise of it is really charming, and overall I recommend it. The second book I would recommend to a bestie is Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawler. This follows Paul, who is able to physically transform his body and his bits, you know what I'm saying, his biology, to be whatever he wants. At the start of the book, we're acquainted with Paul, who is grungy and hot and rock and roll and just experimenting with gender and sexuality. The second part of the book is Paul being in a lesbian relationship with someone that is kind of a TERF, like met her at a Michigan Women's Festival in the 90s, which is when this book takes place. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. In the end of the book, he comes to a pretty nice resolution, I would say. I recommend to the bestie that is a queer people pleaser. I don't mean like a person that pleases queer people exclusively, but I mean a queer and or trans person that has a problem with people pleasing. Paul can transform, which is beautiful and amazing, and can explore so many facets of his identity, but he also changes himself to be liked and loved by people around him. And it is so hard to read at times, to be quite honest. I would definitely recommend this to a bestie, especially a bestie that wants to be a bestie for absolutely everyone. Coming in next, Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martini. I always say Martini, but it's Gretchen Felker Martin. You know what? Why do I feel like just from her picture on the back of the book. Like, she maybe would have a last name that's Martini. You know what I'm saying? Like a little goth martini. Anyways. I picked it up super excited to just read something where men are being torn apart and eaten after all of the hootenannies that have been going on. And this book did not disappoint in that regard. It mainly follows two trans women at the end of the world, and the world ended in this novel because anyone that was above a certain testosterone level got basically a zombie disease and is now a zombie. T-girls are in the clear. Another main character who's a trans guy, and he was gonna get a gender affirmation surgery, and he was off his hormones, and he was spared. So this follows them literally surviving a world that is dominated by TERFs. I feel like when I've heard book talkers talk about this book, and it's focusing on a lot of killing men, this book is also mainly about fighting TERFs. They are truly horrible, and this book makes them just as frightening as they feel in everyday life as a trans person. I've never read anything that has captured the visceral fear that TERFs inspire in trans people, and this book does that. Trigger warning for sexual assault. If you do not want to read about sexual assault, don't read this book. It's not for you. Love you, bestie. The next book I'm recommending is We Both Laughed in Pleasure, The Diaries of Lou Sullivan. I read this at the start of the pandemic, and it got me through the pandemic, let me tell you. Lou Sullivan is a trans man that ended up dying of AIDS, but prior to that death, lived a fabulous life where he explored his life as a gay trans man. It chronicles his life of joy. If I left this book with anything, was you can find joy in anything, and that joy is worth living for. If you look on paper and like read about his life, it's a little sad. But when you read this book, it is so full of curiosity and amor, and it's really hot. This guy had a sexy life. I left reading this book feeling like he is my angel guardian or something. You have to read it. You have to read it, bestie. This is for the bestie that is into archives and or vampires and or MILFs. It's Dead Collections by Isaac Feldman. This book is so cute. It's so cute. A little bit about me is that I'm actually in grad school for archives right now. So this book is very niche to my interest. It follows a trans vampire archivist, and he is sustaining himself at night. He's living in the archive that he works at. He's surviving until an absolute MILF widow drops off the belongings and donates the papers of an ex who wrote the television series that is this cult favorite that the trans vampire archivist is absolutely obsessed with. They form a relationship, and let's just say he starts living, not just surviving. Okay, the boy ends up thriving. Definitely recommend this for a really hot, dark academia read. Last up on my roundup is maybe my favorite book of all time. It is Stonewall Blues by Leslie Feinberg. It's really good. This follows Jess from pre-Stonewall to after Stonewall. It charts police encounters, motorcycle riding adventures, steamy love affairs, riots, more stupid police encounters. This book is about finding a life worth living for when the world doesn't want your life to exist. I would not be the same if I hadn't read this book. I recommend this book if you also really want to know about the history of what it was like to be a lesbian before Stonewall. It's a great historical document in as many ways as it is a great novel. All right, those are my trans bestie recommendations.